Welcome to Truth Illuminated. It's great to be back with you again. Today I have something very special that I'm going to share. And what this is about, it's a tremendous miracle of survival. My wife and I have written a book, and I have been asked by a number of people if I would put this on Truth Illuminated, and I'm trying to do a very condensed version of it. But I really feel the led of the Lord to do this. Before I start, I want to give a special tribute to a very dear friend of mine. His name was John Allman, and John was with me on the day that we had a horrific plane crash. Tragically, John did not survive. Miraculously, I did. For a long time, that just broke my heart. I even prayed, I cried out and said, God, why? Why did you take John and leave me? And only God knows those answers. But before I share this story, I do want to give this very special tribute to my dear friend, John Allman. On June 10th, 2016, John and I were it was an instructional flight. I'm a flight instructor. Prior to this accident, as the day of this accident, I had been instructing for 23 years. I had been flying for 26 years. John and I had 18 hours of advanced training. And on this particular day, we were doing what was called a simulated engine out maneuver. Him and I had done this before. And it had a very tragic ending. It wasn't anybody's fault. And I want to share this story with you because it is a very tremendous story. Now also, as you see these pictures, I want you to know that the fire chief on the day of the accident, he took these pictures and nothing had been moved. So when you see pieces scattered, whatever you see, it had not been manipulated. This is exactly the way the crash looked the day of and after the crash. Obviously, look at this. How could anybody survive what you're looking at right now? A dear friend of mine was working in the control tower that day, and he actually saw this happen. He told me much later, he said, Todd, when I saw the accident, I knew that nobody could survive. And when he found out that there was a survivor in the crash, he was overwhelmed. He just couldn't believe that somebody could survive this. This is a picture of the interior. The flight instructor sits in the right seat. John was in the left seat. The front of the airplane is virtually gone. Now, I want to try my best to try to condense this. There's so many things I could say, but I really, really want to bring out the points that is a must, I feel, in this video. Here's another shot. John was a tremendous Green Bay Packer fan. Matter of fact, the main reason he had the airplane is because he would fly it to Wisconsin to the games. He actually, the Green Bay Packers are the only franchise in the NFL that's publicly owned, and he was one of the owners. Now there's over 360,000 owners of the Green Bay Packers, but he was one of them. Now this story, it's a story of miracles, and I want to emphasize that it's a series of miracles. If I just said I survived a miracle in a plane crash, you could appreciate it, but I'm asking you to please look. There's no way. Listen, luck. I have told this to so many people. There is no such thing as luck. There's no such thing as just coincidence or things just kind of lined up right. It was the hand of God. It was absolutely the hand of God. So I'm going to go through this. I want to point out the absolute miracles that God did on this day. I'm going to start with the first responders. Now, the first responders were in the fire department, in the firehouse located at the airport. It didn't even take them 5 minutes, if that long, to get to the crash scene. I think I remember one of them told me it was like 3 minutes and they were on scene, which was an absolute miracle. If this crash had happened, a matter of fact, let me just back up. This crash happened at the airport. I want to make sure that you understand that. If this had happened away from the airport, John and I both would not have survived. There's no way in the world I could have survived without having immediate attention that I got. Now, I was in the hospital for 4 months. When I got out of the hospital, you'll see later in this presentation how the Lord really led me to write this book. But when I got out and my wife and I felt strongly led to do it, we went around to as many people as we could that were associated on that day with this crash. That meant the first responders all the way to the medical people that were at the hospital. And they were interviewed. And right here, this is an exact quote given to me from one of the first responders. And so I quote it verbatim. And this is what he said. He said, "I'll never forget the smell as we approached the crash scene. The smell of aviation fuel was overwhelming." Now, this is a major, major miracle to begin with, and I'm going to get into how this actually, what happened. But first, I want to share with you that I spoke with a National Transportation Safety Board investigator, and I asked this person about statistically about fires after a crash. And he told me that, Todd, if there's any fuel in the tanks at all, about 50% of the time the planes burn. Now, on that day that this happened with John and I, there was 84 gallons of fuel on board. This was an SR-22, a Cirrus SR-22. That morning, John Allman topped it off, and we were flying literally a bomb. Now, let me explain this. Right here in this picture, I've got an arrow pointing to the filler cap, which is where you put fuel in the tank. Now, I'm going to use my mouse, and I've got a little button here kind of thing, a laser pointer that you can see. Now, in most all airplanes, not every airplane, but in most all airplanes, the fuel tank is located in the wing. Now, this wing, when we hit the ground, we did a hammerhead stall, hit the ground, and the plane cartwheeled. And you can see here that the wing is broke in half. Now, this is what is so miraculous. The fuel tank is there. I want you, the edge of the fuel tank on this side is lined up just about where the wing broke. If that fuel tank on this side had been ruptured, there is no way in the world that I could have survived at all, because the plane would have gone up in a ball of fire. I want you to look at something. Right below here, that is the engine of the aircraft. You say, how in the world did it end up there? God only knows. But we were horrifically cartwheeling down this field when we hit the ground. Now, I'm going to blow this picture up because I got to explain something to you about this. And first, before I do, look at this. The hottest part of the airplane, of the engine is the hottest part, of course, but the hottest part of the engine is the exhaust manifold. The engine's upside down. This is the exhaust manifold, and this is the exhaust manifold on each side. There's part of a muffler right there. Look at this. This engine is upside down. Now, this is right below the fuel tank. If there had been a drop of fuel come down out of that tank and land on this exhaust manifold, it would have been a fire that would have shot up, and that would have ignited the tank. And of course, when the tank would have been ignited, it would have just blew up. The plane would have been a bomb. It's absolutely miraculous what happened. And again, I'm going to try to not take too much time. This was horrific. This is a motor mount, an engine mount. This is an engine mount. And how in the world that ended up like that is unbelievable. Here again is that picture. Now, this is the right side. Now, on the right wing, the fuel tank, of course, there's two fuel tanks, one in each wing. Now, the fuel tank on this side was seriously ruptured. When I quoted one of the responders, he said when they came up to the site, he was overwhelmed. They all were. They were overwhelmed with the smell of aviation fuel. Now, fuel of any kind is volatile. But aviation fuel is even that much more. You know what went through their minds. They're coming to the crash site. They smell fuel everywhere. And they're thinking in their minds, am I going to be able to even walk up to the airplane without this thing subtly exploding? So on this side, the grass underneath this wing, the grass was saturated with aviation fuel. Now, the engine was on the other side. If the engine had been underneath this wing, like it was on the other side, the plane would have went up in an absolute ball of fire. When the first responders got me out of the airplane, they knew that I was injured horrifically, and they figured I was profusely bleeding, and they figured his internal injuries have to be bad. Well, the first thing they did was they got my jeans off, got my clothes off, and laid me there, and then began to work on me, and they called the emergency helicopter, the flight paramedic, to come to the scene. That's another miracle I'm going to share in just a second. But I want you to again look at this. The front of the airplane is virtually gone. So, another miracle. Not a coincidence, not a lucky day, an act of God. The location of the helicopter. The helicopter had been on a trip 76 miles away from a crash scene. They went to an emergency 76 miles away from the crash scene where we were, is what I'm trying to say. And they were just returning. Had the helicopter not been where they were when we had the crash, again, there would have been no survival at all, because they had to get there almost immediately. And here's why. Dan Stowers was the flight paramedic, and this is what he told me. I'll just quickly say that I spent 4 months in the hospital. When I got out of the hospital, I got a call. The day I got a call from Dan. He said, Todd, he said, I am Dan Stowers. He introduced himself. He said, you don't know me, but I was there at the day of your crash. I saved your life. I would like to personally meet you. Most people that I see at a scene like yours, I never get to see them again. And of course, I said, please come over and let's meet. And we both wept when we saw each other, of the joy of him being able to see what happened with me, the final result of my being able to get out of the hospital, and seeing him just blessed me tremendously. This is what he said. He said if he had been 1 minute, and at the most 2 minutes later, I would have drowned in my own blood. That's why being at the airport where it happened, the first responders getting a hold of the helicopter was just returning from this flight. The accident happened in Marion, Illinois. They had gone to Evansville, Indiana, and they were just coming back. Matter of fact, the pilot, much later on, we all talked, he said that he heard us talking to the tower about the maneuver that we were getting ready to do. And he said, I didn't hear you anymore, and I didn't think anything of it, but that's why he didn't hear us anymore, is because we had the crash. Now, Dan, look at this. I had a broken jaw, broken bones in my face. It was due to what's called a Lefort fracture. My face was really broken up bad. My jaw was busted. And he intubated me. Dan Stowers intubated me on the very first try. Both of my lungs had collapsed. They were filling with blood. And Dan told me, as I said just moments ago, had I not been there to be able to intubate you, you would have died. You wouldn't have lasted any more than 2 minutes. And I'm going to quickly share this. Lefort fracture. I'm not a medical person. I learned this much later. My wife is actually a nurse. She would be much better at sharing this. A Lefort fracture, there's 3 types. And it's when the facial bones separate from the base of the skull. Now this is type 1, and it's in this area right here you can see. Type 2, it goes a little bit more up into the nasal area and up here. Type 3 is all your facial bones around here are all broken. I had type 3 Lefort fracture. Again, now let's go into another miracle. The helicopter took me from Marion, Illinois. Matter of fact, this happened at the Williamson County Airport in Marion, Illinois, which the name has been changed to the Veterans Airport of Southern Illinois. The helicopter took me from there and flew me to Barnes Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. 10 minutes after we landed in Barnes, this is what happened. Again, I want to quote, this lady I'm quoting was the main surgeon who worked on me when I got there in the trauma unit. And this is her words. This is what she said. She said, within the first 10 minutes, you no longer had blood pressure. This was your first cardiac arrest. Now that can be debated whether you actually died or not at that moment, but some said yes, some said no. I had 2 cardiac arrests. And she said, we did one of the most intense procedures that can be done on a patient. We opened your chest, which is called a thoracotomy. Now, a thoracotomy, this was done in the emergency room. It wasn't done in the operating room. I didn't need anesthesia. They opened my chest immediately because I had lost my blood pressure, and she wanted to physically get to my heart and start physically beating my heart. But what happened when they opened my chest, both of my lungs had collapsed, but when they opened my chest, one side began to fill up just a little bit with enough air that my heart started beating actually on its own. She said she was reaching for the heart and it started beating. And this again is to quote this doctor, this surgeon, what she said. She said, I was about to make one of the biggest decisions I have ever made. We were ready to stop and then take you to ICU. That's basically that is their mission, their goal. What they want to do in the emergency room is to get a patient to the part where they can just get them to surgery and then begin to do more work. And she said, we had put a temporary dressing on your belly, packing on your face, 2 chest tubes had been inserted, among other things. You were still pouring out blood from your abdominal wound, and your blood pressure was not perfect. And I said, and I highlighted it because she said this was phenomenal to me, to her, the doctor. She said, if I take him upstairs right now like this, he will die. If you ask me what moment during this whole procedure stands out the most to me, this is it. There were so many amazing things that happened, but keeping you in the operating room and readdressing the major bleeding that was going on with your liver saved your life. Now I want to share this because this is so precious. Listen, this whole testimony is for one reason. It's to give Jesus Christ all the glory and the praise and the honor. I want to do that with my life more than anything. And this part right here blesses me tremendously. The Lord Jesus really touches the heart of Dr. Punch, and this is how it happened. Now, when we interviewed Dr. Punch, she was talking to myself and my wife, Sue, at the same time. This she actually addressed to my wife. She said, when I met you, meaning Sue, you might not remember what you said, but this is what you said to me. Whether he lives or dies, he's a winner because he knows the Lord. That was only the grace of God working through my wife, speaking through my wife, that she could not have said on her own. And this was the doctor's response. She said, that floored me. That was the first thing you said to me. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is mountain moving faith. That was a powerful moment for me. I had multiple major injuries. Many were life-threatening. And due to the trauma, all my organs were affected. Now, I'm not going to time wouldn't even allow for me to just tell you and go through a whole long list of everything that was wrong with me. But I take this time for this reason. If you don't understand the extent of my injuries, you can't understand the extent of what God really did. You know, again, I just want to say, if I told you I survived a plane crash, you would say, wow. But if you understood the details of how I survived, you're going to say more than wow. You're going to say, this is absolutely a God thing. I had a severe TBI. I'm sorry for not warning, depending on who's watching. Some of these are maybe a little, what I'm trying to search for the proper word to say. Graphic. They're a little graphic. I had a severe TBI, traumatic brain injury. 2 brain bleeds, axons were sheared. That bolt that you see right here, that's a sensor bolt measuring the pressure in my brain. It's interesting to note the following. 50,000 people die from a TBI each year. 85,000 people suffer long-term disabilities. In the U.S., more than 5.3 million people live with disabilities caused by a TBI. Now, on the Glasgow Coma Scale, which you saw that bolt in the side of my head, which was measuring the pressure, the information that receives is used on this Glasgow Coma Scale. The scale's between 1 and 8. I'm sorry, I think it might be a little bit more than that, but here again, see, I got an excuse, the TBI. Okay, Barnes Hospital, this is what they had my prognosis between the numbers of 3 and 8. So 8 wasn't the highest. I think it goes between 0 and 12, I believe. And so 3 meaning, this is what they gave, this was the prognosis for me. 3 meaning permanently disabled. 8, which was my best prognosis, meaning living with severe disabilities. So my wife was told, we don't know if he's going to live. But if he lives, Mrs. Greiner, we're telling you now that he may have to spend his remainder of his life in a nursing home being permanently disabled. At best, he's going to live with serious and severe disabilities. My dear friend, I don't have any disabilities. I've got some issues because of the accident. They're not even worth talking about. They just remind me of how great God was in this matter. My hand was crushed. My left hand was crushed. And they thought they were going to have to amputate 2 or 3 fingers. And look. Now, I don't want to hand wrestle anybody, but I can do what I need to do. I don't have any problem driving. I don't have any problem weed eating, doing what I need to do like that. So praise be unto God. I had 14 bolts in this device. I remember it. I mean, I don't remember much. For 2 months, I went without a memory. But this device was so heavy on my hand, my wife said that this was something that was constantly bothering you. This picture looks like I've lost all my teeth except that one right there. That's not the case. That was due to the Lefort fracture in my face. I've also down here in my chin area. That's all I've got. I've got metal pieces all down through here where they had to repair that. Now, Barnes Hospital is a large hospital in St. Louis. It's a large hospital. And they told my wife and I, they said to the best of their knowledge, they didn't know of anybody else who had lost as much blood as me and received as much blood as I did and lived to tell about it. In the 2 months' time that I was at Barnes Hospital, I received over 9 gallons. Now, my friend, I'm telling you correctly, not 9 units, not 9 pints or 9 quarts, 9 gallons of blood. That is equal to 72 donors. And listen, I say this, I don't say this frivolously, I say it from the bottom of my heart. If I knew who those donors were, I would love to hug every one of them. I would just hug every one of them and thank them. Their blood saved my life. And I got to say this. The blood of Jesus Christ has saved my soul and yours if you will let His blood be applied by faith to your heart. And these dear precious people, their physical blood saved my physical body. I don't take that lightly at all. I've been asked if I would ever fly again. This picture was taken almost precisely 8 months after the day of my crash. I was in my airplane. I was flying again. And you can tell on my face, I was loving it. No fear. I wasn't worried about anything. But the FAA, they found out about it. I had been diagnosed with a severe TBI. And they got a hold of me and asked if I had been flying. I said, yeah. They said, no. You had a TBI, a severe TBI, and we're grounding you for 4 years. Well, I couldn't argue the point. And, I was doing tremendous. And that's what I told them. But anyhow, what a wonderful thing. I've shared my testimony at a lot of places, and after a lot of speaking engagements, it wasn't uncommon to have somebody ask me if I would write a book. And I would always downplay it. I'd say I'm not an author, and I have no intentions of writing a book. And then one day, this is what the Lord Jesus Christ spoke to my heart ever so clearly. He spoke to my heart and said, this is not your story. It's mine. And friend, I'm going to tell you something. When He spoke that to my heart, that this was His story, I made it everything. It became a mission. My wife and I became a mission to get this book, to write this book. And so there is a book out that details this story. And I wrote half of the book, and my wife wrote the other half. And what you just heard me share was a super condensed version of the story. And to hear my wife, to read her part of the book, it'll just bring you to tears. Her faith, her strength, she was a rock, my precious rock. I love her so much. And so we wrote this book. The book has been well received. I would recommend that you go to Amazon and get it off on Amazon. You can go to any bookstore and order it. I don't know how many bookstores would actually be carrying it. I doubt that. But you can order it, but you can get the book off Amazon. And I thank you so much for taking this time and listening to this story, because it's a story that gives Jesus Christ all the glory and all the credit.